Aristotle was a philosopher who spent most of his philosophical career in the ancient city of Athens. We remember ancient Athens today for many of the profound, scientific, philosophical, and artistic achievements that become a baseline for Western culture for the next 2,000 years. Architecture, literature, poetry, democracy, and philosophy all have roots that trace back to the ideas first lastingly articulated by ancient Greek and especially Athenian intellectuals. Aristotle is usually thought to be the first human to have composed a work that is devoted solely to the question of ethics. Questions of right and wrong had been addressed throughout history prior to this time, but other works had not isolated the question of ethics and considered ethics as a separate discipline worthy of its own investigation and contemplation. Aristotle himself was famously a student of Plato, and Plato was a student of Socrates, that famous Athenian philosopher quoted as saying that the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates had been put to death by the Athenian state because he had encouraged the young people to think for themselves about questions in politics, religion, and ethics. His most famous student, Plato, started a school and carried on the project of Socrates, where Plato tended to answer the questions of Socrates with metaphysical and spiritual response. Plato's student, Aristotle, tended to answer those questions from a practical and scientific perspective. Hence you see here Aristotle pointing toward the earth, where Plato is pointing towards the heavens. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is a book named after his son Nicomachus. It is perhaps composed in an attempt to teach his son how to become a virtuous person. It was composed around 350 before the Common Era. These sections on Aristotle in your textbook will be based primarily upon this work. Aristotle begins the Nicomachean Ethics with the claim that every human activity has some goal. In everything we choose to do, we are trying to accomplish something. In economic activity, we try to get money. In war strategy, we try to win the war. But is it possible that all these things are done for one deeper, underlying reason? Aristotle claims that this goal behind all human action would have to be something that we seek for its own sake, not something that we seek in order to get something else. The example he gives of money is illustrative here. We say that we go to our jobs because we want money. Maybe we even go to school because we want a better job, which will get us more money. Maybe we even buy nice clothes because it will help us get a better job, which will help us make more money. So we may be tempted to say that everything we do in life we do for the sake of getting money. But even a short reflection is enough to show that this cannot be right. We don't want money for its own sake. Money is just paper with pictures on it, and we don't care about paper. If someone printed us a stack of money that we could have, but we could do nothing but keep it, we would say that there was no point or no purpose to that money. Money is only useful because it helps us to get other things that we want, perhaps power, influence, objects, security. But Aristotle will claim that even power and influence, money and security, we may pursue for some further, deeper reason. If we are actually pursuing the things we do for no reason, or we don't know why we pursue the things we do, then in Aristotle's view, we are wasting our lives, because there is no ultimate purpose behind our actions. We will be living, as we will see later, like animals, instead of like humans. Before telling us what the good is, which we seek in all our actions, Aristotle gives us a warning. The search for the good life is not a scientific question. It is the most important question we can ask, because it goes back to the purpose of everything we do. But because it is not, for example, a purely scientific question, we cannot expect a strict mathematical model that will answer all life's questions without error. We must do the best we can to answer the question, because it is too important to ignore, but we cannot expect a perfect and flawless answer to every aspect of the good life. Happiness is the good at which all actions aim. So what is the reason behind all our actions? Aristotle claims that everything we do for the sake of happiness. Let's go back to our example of money. If we seek money for the sake of power and influence, possessions and security, is there a further reason why we seek these four things? Aristotle believes that we seek all of these things in an attempt to find happiness. If we have all of these things which money can help us attain, but we still do not have happiness, then we are still not living the good life, and those other things we seek in life, we do so with the end or goal of happiness. Aristotle thinks that many people would agree that the end or goal of human life is happiness, but for him, this is not the only important question. He also wants to know what human happiness consists in. In Chapter 5, he gives some answers offered by other philosophers. One idea is that human happiness consists in a life of pleasure. Aristotle points out that everyone seems to want pleasure, and most people seem to want a lot of pleasure. But Aristotle also points out that one could be a beast and still live a life of pleasure, and that living the life of a mere animal could not make a well-lived human life. Humans have a higher form of life than a beast. Others will say that happiness is a life where others give you honor. But people could potentially honor you even if you did nothing with your whole life but sleep, or if you lived a very poor life. Just think of some of these celebrities that we honor today. So that cannot define a well-lived human life. It must be more than honor. So Aristotle has linked these three things: the good life, human happiness, and the human purpose. To clarify the relationship here, he goes on to ask, what is the function of human life? If we know the function of human life, then we will know our purpose, and hence we will know when a human life is well lived, namely, when we fulfill our function or our purpose. Aristotle gives the example of a flute player. A flute player is, by definition, someone who tries to play the flute. So you are a good flute player if you play the flute well. We ask, what is the unique function of a thing? And fulfilling that thing well is fulfilling your purpose. The unique function of human life is reason. We already saw that pleasure and desire can't be the purpose of our life, because that is the highest goal of animals. Similarly, Aristotle points out that food, drink, and growth cannot be our purpose. That is the highest goal of plants, which have no other higher purpose. What is unique to humans, which neither plants nor animals can do, is to live the life of reason. Human beings do things for reasons of which they are aware. They create plans, they think about what they do, and they do it. And they attempt to put their actions and beliefs together to make sense of themselves, of their actions, and of their world. Animals might have rudimentary rationality connected to how they fulfill their desires, but only humans can live a fully contemplative life. So for Aristotle, reason is our unique function. Rationality is what sets us apart from the animals and plants, and a well-lived life will be one that is lived according to reason and rationality. I am fulfilling my uniquely human function by action with the uniquely human virtue of thoughtful living. A fulfilled, meaningful, and virtuous human life is one where my life is thought through and my actions are done for good reasons. I am only fulfilled by doing this, and this is the only good life. I make good choices. I consider the consequences of my actions, the purpose of human life, and the effects of my acts on myself and others. If I see that an act fits well with human purpose and happiness, I will choose that act. If I see that an act or attitude has bad consequences, I will choose to act differently. This, for Aristotle, is the virtuous and fulfilled human life. Aristotle's hierarchy of souls. For Aristotle, the soul of an organism is just the unique capabilities of that organism which make it what it is. So a plant has a soul too. The unique ability of a plant that separates it from rocks and dirt is the ability to grow and use nutrition. The unique ability of an animal that separates it from a plant is the ability to see the world, have desires about the world, and respond to those desires. But only a human has the ability to think rationally about the meaning of his or her life and actions. Each organism on the pyramid will also participate in the soul that is beneath it. Though our higher soul, the soul that defines us, is our ability to reason, we still have desires and movement like other animals. And we need food, we need protection like a plant if we are to thrive and live successfully. Reason relates to our lower souls by defining humans and providing us with our purpose and dignity. But reason is also needed to meet the needs of our animal souls in a rational and measured way. For Aristotle, we cannot deny our animal nature. Instead, we should fulfill our desires and provide for our nutrition, but we should do so in a rational way. After all, as Aristotle acknowledges, we cannot reason well if the basic needs of our bodies are not met. At this point, you might be feeling a bit cheated. Has Aristotle simply replaced happiness with another word, so that we are not really talking about happiness at all? He does not think so. According to Aristotle, living for pleasure or honor will not make you happy. The Greek word translated here as happiness is eudaimonia, but the word does not refer, as Aristotle makes clear in this section, to simply a passing feeling of elation. I am happy when I find $10 in the street, but this does not make me a happy person. I am sad when a close friend moves away, but I can still be a happy person who is feeling sad today. So for Aristotle, true happiness is not a temporary feeling, but is a lasting feeling of contentment that we get when we look over our entire lives and say, I have lived a fulfilled, meaningful, purposeful, and well-lived life. And for Aristotle, this feeling can only come from living life well or virtuously and making good choices. So for him, happiness is a well-lived, meaningful life, and the two are one and the same. So how does virtue relate to morality? You may have noticed that Aristotle has not yet mentioned the word morality in his essay. Instead, he is using the word virtue. The goal, so far, is to live a life of virtue instead of morality. What is the difference? Aristotle and many of the ancient Greeks did not believe that we learned how to be good primarily by dividing specific kinds of acts into one list we would call moral and the other we would call immoral. They believed that the central question in ethics was instead, what kind of person am I? Or, am I living a well-lived life? From the point of view of virtue and virtue theory, questions about right and wrong cannot be separated from who I am, how I live, and the kind of person that I am. Someone who lives well is virtuous, and the things they do are correct because they are part of a meaningful and well-lived life. Separating off single actions, distinct from our life context, is not the approach of virtue ethics. We will see that Kant and the utilitarians do usually take the perspective of moral judgments, rather than, like Aristotle, the perspective of virtue theory.